Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. This is a one-on-one interview with Chris Wheeler from the Daily Mail. Chris, thanks for coming back on the channel. Good to see you
again, Jay. Yeah, how are you?
I'm all right. I was trying to work out when last time I saw you was. I think it was San Diego, wasn't it? We didn't.
During the tour, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't cross paths in Vegas.
No, we didn't. No, enough. No.
You were probably too busy working. I was probably.
How did that happen?
Just lounging around the pool and doing now.
Miracle.
Yeah, exactly. Have we had any statements in the last 10 minutes that we need
Not
to
that I know of.
of?
I keep checking the phone. No, it's all quiet right now, so let's go far away while it's all quiet. Come on.
Okay. People, get involved in the comments in the chat. Any questions you've got for Chris? We're going to be talking about all things United related. It's going to be talking about Jadon Sancho, Harry Maguire, the Glazers, a little bit about Ghazi, the one that came and went very quickly, that transfer story. So make sure you get involved in the comments and hit that like button as well. Chris, I just want to ask you a little bit about Harry Maguire. Let's start with this one because obviously played for England last night. He came on and I had it sort of, me and you were talking about sort of watching it and having it on and stuff. And I'm not a massive England fan. I wasn't really sort of engrossed. I was just I am a bit of a top red. I was like, I'll sort of see how Marcus Rashford's getting on and things like that. And then I saw Maguire came on and I was doing something else and then I turned and the next thing I saw was Harry Maguire put it into his own net. And my heart sank for him, right? Because I'm not Harry Maguire's biggest fan, but he gets a lot of grief and I knew what was coming. Yeah. And Gareth Southgate stuck up for him and sort of said that he can't believe the amount of grief that he gets. What do you make of it all? Just the sort of the feeling around Maguire. What do you make of it from like the sort of the England perspective last night? When you saw that, did you think, here we go, he's going to get pelters? This is one of those times.
Yeah, it does feel like he can't do right for doing wrong right now, can he? I mean, you do feel for the guy. It goes back, I guess, to, I'm thinking, Australia tour last year when we heard some of the booing in, I think, Melbourne.
Yeah.
And that seemed unfair then. And it's kind of become the fashionable thing for some of the idiots to kind of go and boo Harry Maguire.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It's just, I think it just breeds, some idiots breed more idiots and it kind of carries on and stuff. It does seem unfair. I do understand the frustration. I do understand, that some fans feel that he should have moved on this summer, that he could have moved on this summer. That he didn't really fancy it, and so part of the reason that he's still at the club is very much because he didn't want to go. I understand that frustration, but I think in general, the barracking of Harry Maguire, the treatment of him, it does seem a bit unfair, it does seem a bit cruel at times, yeah.
No, I hear you, because I felt he should have moved on in the summer. I don't think he's got much of a future at Manchester United. No. I think it just feels like you can almost sense that when he comes onto the pitch at Old Trafford, the crowd are like, here we go. And he's usually coming on as a substitute as well. Yeah. And you saw it in the Arsenal game. I know that wasn't at Old Trafford, but he comes on and then we can see 2 goals. Not his fault we can see those goals, but it's like, Maguire comes on and we end up losing or whatever. But it does feel like it's on him. Do you think there's much hope for him at United now? I know this sounds crazy for a guy that was a captain not long ago and is an £80 million defender. Do you think he can salvage it, or do you think maybe in January they need to look at it?
Well, first question, can he salvage it? No. Yeah. I think when you look at what Ten Hag says and what Ten Hag does are 2 different things. Yeah. Ten Hag will talk him up. He'll say he's got a chance, he's got a shot, he can play for us, he can do the A, B and C. And yet every single decision that Eric Ten Hag makes is against Harry Maguire. It's leaving him out, it's not playing him, it's putting, whether it's Varane, whether it's Martinez, Lindelof, Shaw, he's now brought Johnny Evans in, he was getting heading on. So it just feels like whatever Eric says, what he does is quite clear. He's not really having Harry Maguire. January is difficult because you've got the same problem then that you had in the summer. You've got, who can buy him, who can afford him, who can pay the wages. Will the club give the payoff that would be needed to go and move him on? I think unless Maguire realises in the first half of the season that he's not going to play and thinks, well, you know what, it makes sense to move on now, I think it'll be next year before he actually goes.
What do you make of Harry Maguire when if you ever see him in interviews or if you spoke to him? Does he have the confidence of someone, do you think, to be at United, or do you think there's a guy there that is just lacking in confidence and just needs to move on for his own good as well?
Yeah, I mean, in the past I said about, he didn't ask to cost £80 million. He didn't ask to be made captain. On the other hand, when you do see him, when you see him talking, when we talk to him sometimes, not often enough, and you look at some of the great captains down the years, the great Man United captains, and I don't think Harry Maguire measures up to that. Yeah. I don't think he's a true leader in that sense. But again, he didn't ask for all that. He didn't ask for what he was given. I think he is what he is. He's a good player. He's a good England player. And he still performs at a decent level. I just feel with Man United, decent first season or two, and then it just sort of it's got away from him. And I felt certainly this summer the best outcome absolutely was that he moved on, he got a new start somewhere else, and that didn't happen. And so here we are again. He's kind of 4th, 5th, 6th choice, on the bench, off the bench. The Arsenal game was very unfortunate. It was a really bad look that the way it ended with him and Evans playing towards the end. It wasn't entirely their fault. But you've got the Leicester pairing from 3-4 years ago.
Mate, it's great for social media memes, doesn't it?
It was an unfortunate look for Man United in a big game like that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you could, like you say about the look, because you mentioned there, Luke Shaw gets in ahead of him at centre back. He was unavailable. Then you had Varane and Lindelof and Martinez going off and Varane not available. Yeah. Brian Casey in the chat says, as frustrating as it has been to watch Maguire play, and he should no longer be a United player, the booing and abuse he receives is unacceptable. He's still a United player and should be supported. Robin Graves says
100% on that one, by the way.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree. I was in Australia last summer when he was getting booed. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I think because that is United fans, and I was thinking, okay, England fans have always had a funny relationship with United players anyway, and I think any excuse to give them a dig. But for United players to be booing our own captain in a pre-season tour baffled me. And now you're saying, like you said earlier, it's become a bit of a thing, hasn't it? I
think, he can't go anywhere until January. He won't go anywhere, I don't think, until the summer. Booing him doesn't get anybody anywhere. It doesn't help anybody.
No.
If you're not really having him, then fine, that's your personal opinion. But he can't go anywhere now. Yeah. So you might as well get behind him.
Yeah, definitely. I think he needs that. I think it might be frustrating for fans, and like you said, people might look at it and go, he shouldn't be here, he's on massive money and all the rest of it, but he's playing for Manchester United, and if we want to get the best out of him, booing him isn't going to help his confidence. So you might not be Harry Maguire's biggest fan, and I think fans do have a right to criticise a player when they think he hasn't put in the performances that they expect, but I do feel like at times it might be, a reason to get behind him is because of all the grief he's getting. And you don't know, because sometimes when England fans turn on a player, it encourages United fans to get behind them.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what I mean? You've seen that before with Maguire. We've seen it before where we say, hang on a minute, he's our player.
He's one of ours. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that maybe we'll see that if he does play against Brighton, I'll be at Old Trafford at the weekend, and hopefully we can get behind him, because as long as someone's putting on a shirt for Manchester United, I'm always going to get behind him.
Yeah, 100%.
Talking of putting on a shirt for Manchester United, the Jadon Sancho saga that you've been covering.
Never a quiet day.
No, there isn't, is there? No. We thought international break might be a bit quieter. We were like, we've got international break. There's no games. We can all have a little bit of a relax. We can just take it easy. And then all sorts was going on. We had Antony, which we'll get to in a minute. But Jadon Sancho, there was the reaction after the Arsenal game where, first of all, I can just roll it back. What did you make of Erik ten Hag's comments about Sancho? Did you think they were out of order? Did you think they were fair? What did you make of it when he spoke about his performances in training?
He was asked, well, he wasn't, was he? He was asked about why Sancho wasn't there. Yep. So he could have answered that question in a number of different ways. People say, but you can't lie. Well, managers bend the truth. Ferguson, goodness me, Fergie bent the truth to us how many times?
Yeah.
Ferguson would never have said that. He would always have gone a different route. So Ten Hag had a choice. He had a choice to take that on in different ways. He knew what he was saying, and he knew what impact that would have. So is that the right thing to go and do with a player? Personally, I probably wouldn't do that. That wouldn't be I'd try and keep it in-house, because as soon as that happened, it basically brought Sancho out. It brought the whole thing out into the open. And I think the last 2 weeks has showed that the club didn't really need that, So I can understand why Jadon, came back, but I think Erik could certainly have handled that one better. Yeah.
Then we had the tweet, which seemed to come out. I don't know the exact time, but very quickly after Ten Hag's comments, the tweet came out from Jadon Sancho where he pushed back a little bit on what Ten Hag had said.
Definitely.
And, said the bit that stuck out for me, and I'm paraphrasing, was a bit about how he felt he'd been made a scapegoat and people don't know what's going on, which was sort of very intriguing, because you think, okay, what's he on about then? What does that mean? What did you make of Sancho's response? Because that seemed to, just from the United fans I spoke to and what I saw online, that seemed to upset more people than Ten Hag's comments from the fan base point of view.
I can see why, because that for me, that threw fuel onto the fire. If you look at what Ten Hag said, he said he's not playing against Arsenal this week because he didn't train well this week. He was keeping it very much in perspective of, I don't think the players play well enough this week in training. that's not too bad. What Sancho did then, he took it onto a much wider scale. You know, he talked about the whole scapegoat thing, which widened it, made it much more serious, and accused Ten Hag of lying, which is a huge thing to do. And I don't know whether he can come back from that. I think obviously last night the tweet came down. They've obviously had talks, and the feeling within the club, from what I've heard and been talking to people, is that, you know, the tweet coming down was a positive first step. Will it be enough to turn things around in the long term? Time will tell. But it's clearly a serious one. It's got history in terms of what happened over Christmas when Jadon went away to Holland. He got some help. The manager stuck with him then. I think the hope was that he would come back in, and he did for a while look okay. On tour, looked okay, playing as a false nine in most of the games.
The Arsenal game.
Looked quite bright. Again, last year looked good on tour, then didn't have a good season.
Yeah.
Kind of playing that same sort of thing now, where he looked good in the States. He played well. The season started. He's not really involved. And this time, having handled him with an arm around the shoulder the first time around, Ten Hag has been a lot harder this time. And clearly, when you look at Jadon Sancho's career, short career so far, you look at Man City, you look at Dortmund, England definitely, he's frustrating a lot of coaches and coaching staff in his timekeeping. Nothing major, nothing serious, just his timekeeping, lackadaisical, unprofessional. And certainly with someone like Ten Hag, that won't wash. We've seen it with Ronaldo, we've seen it with Rashford, other players. He will, you know, if you don't play to his rules, you're in big trouble, and that's what's happened. And so I thought Eric could have avoided it. He didn't. I thought what he said was in proportion, and I think Jadon's response was out of proportion.
Yeah, because it kind of had a few twists and turns, this story as well, didn't it? Because I think there was an article in your paper, I think it was from Sam, one of the writers in your paper, about when Ten Hag spoke about him mentally being not in the right frame of mind, or however he termed it, I'm paraphrasing again, he spoke about physically and mentally we need to get him to where he needs to be around that Christmas period. Yeah. Then there was a story about, should he have said that? Did he have permission? Yeah. It feels like there was a little bit of tit for tat going on there. Now we've had this tweet deleted, which, it's like you say, I mean, it's a step. It seems a step forward to me anyway, that's gone. But when you're a manager who's, you know, got rid of one of the biggest players in the world in Ronaldo, dropped your top scorer because he was late, and then you get faced with something like this. I mean, you've got to sort of stick to your guns, really, haven't you, as a manager, if that's your
absolutely
MO.
You can't dip, you can't swerve one, and, you know, I mean, going back to what Ten Hag said first time around, I was there when he said it, and I think as soon as a manager mentions the word mental, you know, in whatever context, in this day and age, it becomes a much bigger issue. And of course, it's kind of come out now, like you said, maybe a bit of tit for tat. The Sancho camp, you know, questioning whether or not, you know, that he should have said that. So I don't know, but I think certainly Ten Hag, he's not one to waver. He's not one to bend the rules. He knows what he wants. He expects certain standards, and if you don't meet those, and he said it time and time again, you know, time and time again, he has talked about the standards and how they've got to keep them up. And if you don't, then that's you done, you know. And that's why, because Sancho now, it's not the first time, and because of how he has reacted with the post and calling his manager a liar effectively, and the whole scapegoat thing, he's on very, very thin ice now. Yeah.
I saw there was an article, I think it was from Laurie in the Athletic as well, wrote it today. I think it was Dan Sheldon, about Sancho and about his time at Dortmund. And, you know, one of the saddest things for me in the article was it mentioned about at Dortmund, I think it was the caretaker manager, paired him up with Erling Haaland, because Erling Haaland, you know, in terms of rooming with him and training with him, because he's such a professional, that'll rub off on him. And you think, you know, that's Erling Haaland who's gone to City now, and we've got Sancho who's really struggling. There was talk as well, I've seen it a few places, about how maybe he could have gone to Saudi, didn't fancy that one. Again, I mean, is it just a case of sort of someone coming in for him now, waiting for that to happen? Do you think that's the next move then?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did the story. I mean, that El Atifek, they went in for him. Yeah. That effectively agreed through intermediaries a loan. But I think the fact that Man United were prepared to listen to offers this summer of about £45 million for him, and were prepared to let him go on loan to Atifek if they commit to a £50 million permanent deal next summer, quite clearly they were prepared, you know, they would have let Jadon Sancho go. But yeah, obviously he was a great player at Dortmund. Some would argue, you know, the Bundesliga is not quite the same. But he looked really good, and there were issues there with his discipline, and he got dropped a few times, fined a few times. And when you look back now, Man United chased him for the best part of 18 months, 2 years. You know, there was a real long pursuit there, £73 million. They got him through a door. I remember when he came in, he was talking about street skills and all this, and you're expecting so much more from him. And I was saying before that if you look at a highlight reel of Jadon Sancho's time at Man United, what goes into that highlight reel? What's he done? And when I see Garnacho, and to a degree, when I see Pellistri come on, and I see the injection of pace and the directness and the penetration and the fans off the seats, that's what I thought Sancho was going to bring to the table, and he hasn't. You know, I don't know why.
I agree, and I think actually, I mean, you make a great point about the way when Erik Ten Hag mentions certain things, how that can be perceived and things like that. But I think the manager has made an effort with him. I think you can see that. So say go to the Netherlands for a few months in the middle of a season where we've already got a World Cup in the middle of the season. Right. We're fighting on 4 fronts, and you go to one of your biggest players in terms of fees, one of your most expensive players. Go and get a bit of time off or train a different training regime to get yourself right. The fans, I was at Old Trafford when he returned. We're chanting his name constantly. The fans have been getting behind him. It just doesn't feel like it's been happening for him. And you think, is there a way of fixing it? You've got a manager who's tried different ways. You've got fans who... I think Jadon Sancho is a relatively popular player with the fans. I don't think the fans have turned on him by any stretch of imagination.
I'd agree.
I think he's got, for want of a better expression, I think he's got decent people in the squad around him. He seems to have a good relationship with Marcus Rashford, who we've seen good levels from. Luke Shaw, players like that. They all seem to get on well, and you know, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, he was pictured recently with him, I think, in a national break at some Empire. But these are players who've been performing for United and who seem to have that professionalism. And it is a shame, like you say, because when we were linked with him, you thought, oh God, Jadon Sancho, what a great player.
And I think that's the frustration from Eric's point of view, is that he was so patient with him first time around. He was so kind of caring and sympathetic, and he managed to get him back on side. And he did that first time around, but then I don't think with Ten Hag you get that many lives. I think he'll stick with you so far, and if you don't do what he wants, then that's it. And I don't think that Sancho's done enough right now. I think he's got a lot of, you got Rashford, you got Garnacho, Antony, Pellistri, Mount can play wide, Bruno can play wide. There's a lot of options there. If you're playing for Man United, you've got to bring it, and Sancho for me hasn't done that.
Just on Ten Hag and his approach to this team, and the way, you mentioned there Ronaldo earlier, you mentioned Rashford. There was rumours and stories, I should say, and reports about Garnacho having to have a little word with him as well earlier when he's a bit late for meetings, and now we've seen the way with Sancho. Do you think he's got the right approach that's needed at United with this sort of disciplinarian? Because one of my biggest gripes about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I loved Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for what he did as a player and actually what he did as a manager. There was some great times under Ole. People forget that. There was a time when we were sort of at the top of the table and winning derbies, and it was great. Paris, of course. How can we forget? And then it obviously all went wrong. But one of my sort of biggest gripes was, at times, I think he needed to be tougher with certain players, and he seemed like he was too friendly with them. Erik Ten Hag obviously has that discipline. Is that what's needed? Do you think that he's got the right approach to make United successful?
Absolutely. I think, don't forget, it wasn't so long ago that under Jose things turned toxic. Absolutely toxic. And you had that kind of Ibrahimovic couldn't believe the standards had dropped, and what he came to. He thought Man United would be the creme de la creme, and he came in and thought, what's this? When other players came in and Pogba was doing what he was doing, and under Jose everything turned toxic. With Ole, it kind of alerts the other way. Suddenly it was the arm around the shoulder, it was the friendly coach, it was your best mate. There were cheap debuts being given out to the kids, everyone was on first name terms, and that's fine for some players, but for others, Pogba was rehabbing injuries in Dubai and Miami, he was having days off. It had a real, loosey-goosey feel to it, you know what I mean? And it needed that. Erik Ten Hag coming, I think part of the fact Erik Ten Hag came in was because he was going to bring that to the table. And he's done that. And I can remember when he first came in, doing the stories about him, and he said, this is a guy that wanted the bottles lined up in a certain way, the drinks bottles in the dressing room. I can remember, he'd send the players out on a training run for 90 seconds, and they'd come back in 87. He said, no, if I say 90, I mean 90. This is a guy who is almost off the scale in terms of what he expects and the fine details. Yeah, and that's what Man United needed and still do need. The fact that, issue with Sancho, okay. Antony's nothing to do with Ten Hag. Greenwood nothing to do with Ten Hag. In general, the discipline is so much better. And fair play to the guy. He's taken on the big names. He's not a flat track bully. He's taken on Ronaldo. He's taken on Rashford. He's taken on Sancho. If you cross the guy, you're in big trouble.
What do you make of him in press conferences and when you speak to him on a one-on-one basis? Because I've been to a couple of press conferences that he's done. I get a good impression, but I'm not, as experienced as you are. You've seen these United managers some of them have struggled with the questions and the press and the whole, sort of the scale of being the manager of Manchester United and having to deal with the press and some of the questions you get. What do you make of the way he handles you guys?
In general, he's very direct.
Yeah.
He doesn't suffer fools. If he doesn't like the question, he's not going to answer it. He literally, you can't kind of coax words out of him. If he wants to say something, he'll say it. If he doesn't, and that's why the comment about Sancho was so kind of stark, because you can't make him say that.
You don't have any. There's no way he was a mistake or there
no.
Was
he knew what he was saying.
Lost in translation. Any of that?
He knew
not having
any
of that one.
And I mean, the first press conference we had in New Jersey on tour, and my first two questions to him, I said, now you've spent another £120 million, whatever. Now it's 180 now, isn't it? Do you see that you finished third last season? Do you see yourselves as being title contenders? And he sort of sidestepped it. And I went again, and I said, same question, different wording.
Yeah.
And he saw it coming. He's looked at me and said, you just asked me that question. And quite clearly, he wasn't going to get drawn into Man United being title contenders. And having seen the first 4 games, I don't blame him. He obviously knows that they're not quite there yet. So what's he going to say? We can't make him say, yes, we are title contenders. So I think in general, he's very straight with us. This season, I found him so far, in its early days, I found him a little bit more curt. He's been more guarded, a little bit more, kind of standoffish. And what would concern me is after Arsenal, there were a lot of excuses that you don't normally get from him. About the foul on all that he thought was a penalty on Højlund, about the Garnacho goal that got ruled out, and the foul on Johnny Evans when Declan Rice scored. So, that's not like him. Normally, he's a lot more measured, and he came out and he seemed to be really rattled, and that would concern me. That even though he still has a kind of calm exterior, what he was saying, for me, that's Ten Hag rattled, and that's a bit concerning. Yeah,
I know what you mean, because I felt his pain with some of those decisions. I was a bit like, that could have gone the other way, or that felt like a foul, or whatever. But it's not something I'd associate with Erik Ten Hag. Like you say, he's a pretty cool customer usually.
Yeah, and to be fair, being impartial as we always try to be, I don't think it was a foul on Højlund. Garnacho was offside. It's a marginal one, but he's offside. And I thought Evans went down a little bit easily on the Rice goal. I've watched the comments come flying in there. But that's my take. I mean, that's.
I'll give you the Rice one, but I'm still saying that Højlund was fouled. That's my opinion. But we don't need to argue. Get involved in the comments and tell Chris why I'm right. Someone already said it was a penalty though, straight away. What do you expect? Get involved in the comments and let us know what you think. Any questions for Chris as well? There's just a few people. Sancho's sort of a few people discussing Sancho. Gary Oakey says, sorry, I'm Eric out. His signings have been awful. No style of play. That's quite rare that someone's as critical of Erik Ten Hag. I'm with Sancho, sorry, it says Ahmad fans. There was nothing to apologise for there. If you want to back the player, I get that. Do you think, though, you mentioned there about, you asked him about the title race and what's next, because you finished third, you spent money. Do you think there is a pressure on him to kick on, or can United just get Champions League football again? Let's say for example we finish fourth, don't win a trophy. Do you think that would be enough for the ownership in terms of the club at the minute, or do you think he needs to show a bit more this season?
I think fourth and no trophy would be about par. I think last season he overachieved marginally. Okay. Third and the trophy I think was great for his first season. There was some serious, the Liverpool games, City,
Don't know what you're on about, Chris. Don't remember either of those games.
Sociedad, not Sociedad. Sevilla, sorry. There were some worrying points in that season. This season, I think because he overachieved slightly, the question is, where's success this season?
Yeah.
They can't win it, so therefore second would be an improvement, third would be par, fourth would be par. It has to be top four. A trophy again, hopefully, but who knows? And I don't know. It's difficult. How do you deem success? this season. But I think also there's no I mean, he's the manager of Manchester United. He's just spent £400 million in just over 1 year. There will always be pressure. He'll always be under pressure to a certain extent. No question about it. What's interesting after these first 4 games, losing the first 2, I think anybody, not the first 2 games, losing 2 of the first 4 games, nobody envisaged anything like the start of what happened last season, Brighton and Brentford. It hasn't been that bad, but it hasn't been that good either. And I was having this chat with someone yesterday, and we're talking about the fact that how quickly at football clubs, and certainly Man United, a crisis can come on you. And you're only ever 2 or 3 games from an absolute crisis. Brighton is far from a gimme game. That's going to be a hell of a game on Saturday. If he loses that one, that's 3 defeats from his first 5. You've got Harry Kane and Bayern Munich waiting on, is it Wednesday? Or Tuesday, where Harry Kane can, basically show Man United what they missed out on. The crisis can very quickly build. Hopefully not. Hopefully beat Brighton, get a good result in Munich, everything's fine. But if you mention pressure, it's always there, and the pressure can come on very, very quickly.
I've been doing this for a little while, and every time I speak to you or your colleagues, they say a similar thing about being Manchester United manager. Going back to when we first started doing this, we started doing this when Fergie was still manager, and that was different. But Moyes, Jose, Van Gaal, Radnick, whoever, you're always under pressure. And like you say, those 3 games, you saw it with Ole. Yeah. We got to the Europa League final, we finished second. I mean, that almost gets ignored sometimes, finishing second, how impressive that is to finish second in this league. It's not easy. Yet, by September, the knives are out for him. It was like, because he losing those games, the manner, 5-0 at home to Liverpool, to lose, City almost taking it easy on you at Old Trafford, because it's like the training game for him. He was done, wasn't he, really? And
absolutely.
And that's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who would always have the backing of a lot of the fans, and had just had a very good 2 seasons, and yet he was gone by, was it Christmas, I think?
Remember Ferguson back in '96? Was it the 5-0 against Newcastle and the 6-2 against Saints all in 1 week?
Yeah,
it felt like the world had fallen in. It felt like, and that was Ferguson. It felt like, oh my, people couldn't believe it. They were in shock, and obviously he was never in danger of being sacked at that stage, but it's amazing how quickly a crisis can develop and overwhelm you. And if you haven't got the credit in the bank, and you haven't got everyone behind you, and the players aren't always with you. I'm not saying that's the case with Ten Hag now. I'm just saying that things can turn so quickly, and you think you've got it, you think you've got this. Look at the Arsenal game, where Garnacho scores, happy days. You're going to win the game 2-1. Gets chalked off, 3-1 defeat. Sancho happens, Antony happens, and suddenly out of nowhere, the whole mood of the club is shifted over the 4 or 5 hours.
What do you make of that away record, Chris? Because it baffles me. When you're talking now, you mentioned Sevilla, you mentioned Liverpool, you mentioned City. We're talking about the Arsenal game, talking about the Spurs game already this season. I think you're right about the Brighton game, because Old Trafford's been a fortress for us under Erik ten Hag. He said that after the Sociedad game or whenever it was, and we haven't lost since. But away from home against these teams, it's weird for me, because you were so good at Old Trafford, beating City, beating Barca, beating Liverpool, beating Arsenal, and away we seem to struggle. What have you made of that, just from reporting on it?
It's a weird one, Jay, and I don't, honestly, it's very hard to explain. But also, going back to what I said before, that Arsenal game, but for a couple of marginal calls, we win that game. We win that game. That record's over. No one's talking about it. We've beaten Arsenal fair and square. But it doesn't happen. And it just seems, I don't know whether it's a mental thing. For me, what was interesting about the Arsenal game was, under Ole, we were very much a counter-attacking team. Everything was on. And when we bring in Ten Hag in, it was to try and make us more of a possession-based team, try and get control of games. And yet you look at that Arsenal game, the goal that was and the goal that wasn't, both came from breakaways. We are still, in many ways, in those kind of games, we are a counter-attacking team. And so I don't know where we're going. And the gentleman who mentioned before about Ten Hag out, but there's no game. I'm still concerned that where's the team's identity? What are we? Where are we going with this? It goes back to when we signed Mason Mount. Should we have gone for Caicedo? Should we have gone for someone who's going to sit deeper? Where does Mount fit in? I still don't quite know where Mount fits in, and that makes me a little bit nervous about, do they know what they want and where they're going? And I'm not sure yet they really do.
The odd thing is as well, I don't mind us being a counter-attacking team. I'm in a minority. I think everyone now in football is obsessed with this possession-based and controlling the game. But some of even under Fergie, we could be a counter-attacking team.
100%, yeah.
You think about Ryan Giggs and Andre Kanchelskis and players like that flying down that wing, counter-attacking. Some of the best football I've seen. Think of the Arsenal games when we had Ji-Sung Park and Rooney.
That goal from Ronaldo in the Champions League.
Just counter-attacking. And it's become almost like a dirty word. And it's like, you don't want to be counter-attacking. You need to have all the possession and be progressive and all that. And I think I get it. I get that that's the way you are as a manager and that's your style and your philosophy, even though I hate that word. But I don't mind as long as you're winning football matches. If you are counter-attacking, I didn't mind at the Etihad under Ollie when we were counter-attacking and beating them.
No, but I think also you need to have more strings to your bow. You need to have a kind of game management, which I think that's what Ten Hag's meant to be bringing to us, is he's meant to be able to bring a multi-dimensional team who can play in different ways. Yes, they can control. When they're not in control, they can break and score. And hopefully that's what we saw at Arsenal, that it's not, that there is more to our game plan. But I don't know, there just seems to be a little bit of uncertainty right now between the players we signed, what are we doing, where are we headed. And also it got picked up in some of the early games. We've gotten a keeper now who plays out from the back. But the players he's playing to, are they good enough to then play out from the back? And so he was knocking it 5 yards and someone else was knocking it 25 yards and it was coming back again. It just didn't seem to be like we'd got the game plan quite nailed down yet.
I hear what you're saying, definitely. A couple of comments. I'll get into a couple of comments. Get your questions in for Chris as well. Robin Graves says, Ten Hag is being hamstrung by all that is going on at the club. Sure, he has been able to bring in some reinforcements, but it seems he didn't get most of the ones he really wanted. Just on that, Chris, what did you make of the transfer window? Because United certainly were busy. There was a lot going on. A lot of players came in. And some of them obviously in areas that we needed. You mentioned goalkeeper and we needed a striker. Do you think United did good business in the transfer window, or do you think it was almost there? What's your take on it?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think they would say, and I partly agree with them, they had their main targets. They got their main targets. They say that, and okay. Mount 60 million for a player that only had 1 year left felt toppy to me. That felt like a pretty high fee. Anana, was it 47.2, something like that, for a player who was on a free a year ago, played under Ten Hag. Ten Hag knows him. Yeah. He moved from Ajax to Inter 12 months ago on a free, and 12 months later, his old manager's paying 47.2 million pounds for him. I know for a fact when Man United first started looking at Højlund, they were looking at fees around the 30 or 40 mark. They ended up paying 72 for him. So I don't think they got any bargains. They may have got their main targets. Højlund and Kane, that's I think the biggest talking point. I think, and it's just uncanny that Man United have drawn Bayern in the Champions League, playing Bayern first up in Munich, Harry Kane.
What could possibly go wrong, Chris? What are you on about? Hey, they're going to see what Rasmus Højlund does, not what Harry Kane does.
They'll be quaking. I mean, look, I think in the club's defence, it wasn't so much the fee for Harry Kane, although, again, guy that's got a year left, £100 million, a lot of money, 30 years old, his ankles are 34 years old, let's face it, there were mitigating factors with Harry Kane. I'm told one of the big ones was the wages, that it wasn't just we can't pay £100 million, it was we can't commit to the 3-4 year contract beyond that on those kind of wages. So Højlund, though, at 72, I think for many people was pushing close enough on the Kane fee that people thought, well, if you're paying that for Højlund, go and get Harry Kane. Whether or not Levy would have gone for it, I don't know. But that was the one where I think a lot of people thought, go with what you know. Go with the guaranteed goals. Go with the guy who's a Premier League legend. You can have him now. You can get 4 or 5 years out of him. Because Harry Kane's not about pace. You can have Harry Kane for 4 or 5 years. So for me, I'd like to have seen that one happen. Anana, I think probably it was time for De Gea to move on. I don't think they handled it very well. It was all a bit shoddy and messy. They could have given him a good send-off. He got the Golden Glove Award and the Appearance Award and everything. You could have given him a decent send-off, been more decisive, and then got somebody in. But Anana looks decent. Looks decent. Fair play to them with that. And Mount, I do like Mount. It's just, as I mentioned before, the thing about Mount is did we need Mount when you look at the players we have in that kind of band of the pitch in that area, or did we need a Caicedo or someone like that to play a little bit deeper?
Just on those signings as well, before I move on, Amrabat, do you think he's a starter for Manchester United? Do you see him coming in and starting games? Do you think he's going to rotate? What do you think his role could be at Old Trafford? Because he became like the guy that everyone was giddy for us on socials when I spoke to us. Like, we need to get Sofian Amrabat. And I didn't see a lot of him. I saw him in the World Cup and I saw him in the Europa Conference final, for what that's worth. But he's here now, and he's a player that obviously operates a little bit differently to certain other players. Do you think he's going to have a big part to play, or do you think he could be?
I hope so. He looks very handy. I think it's interesting, the players around him, because I saw Gary Neville's comment about McTominay, that he's managing him out of the club, which is interesting, coming from an ex-pro who knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Clearly, I think going back to Maguire, I think Ten Hag has maybe taken a view on McTominay. I think he could have left also and didn't. So he's still with us. Casemiro's come back and he looked a little bit, not the best shape early on. He's not in his best form at the moment. Eriksen, for me, fantastic start to his time at the club. Got the ankle injury, came back, wasn't great second half of last season, and doesn't look particularly brilliant right now. So, again, things change quickly. Fred's gone, McTominay's stayed. You've got Casemiro and Eriksen there. Amrabat, I think will be looking to be a starter. I think Eric will want him to be a starter. Whether that means maybe pushing Eriksen further forward, or whether, like you say, you've got so many games. You need a big squad. You need players to go and rotate, not only that, in that area of the pitch, but Eriksen can play further forward, number 10, run with Mount, with Bruno. So things, I think we've already seen the way this season started, the number of injuries they've had, I think has underlined the fact that you need a big squad.
No, I completely agree, and I think that's what sort of hamstrung us, to use someone's term from earlier in the comments last season, is whilst we did very well in the Cups, getting far in certainly in two of them, there was times when we needed that squad. City have got a squad, unfortunately, and United, when we lose one or two players, Casemiro being one of them, obviously missed those games through suspension, then you start looking and thinking the quality's not quite there. Hopefully Sofian Amrabat can do a job on that front. There's been reports, Chris, I wanted to ask you about this, about the Glazers trying to convince, and I know these change all the time, and I could ask you a different question on the ownership tomorrow, trying to convince Ineos not to just let them stay, but to have voting rights on the board. What do you make of that idea? Do you think that's got any legs to it?
With them, I wouldn't rule anything out. Yeah. Seriously, I mean, obviously this whole takeover process is being behind a cloak of secrecy, that you've got Rain supposedly kind of orchestrating the whole thing. Then you got talk of the Sheikh going behind Rain's back, direct to the Glazers. You got the talk of 2 Glazers staying in, 4 getting out. You got the US hedge funds looking to it. It's just, there's so many strands to this. It's like a episode of like Succession, It's just, I mean,
I wondered what you were going to say there. I thought you could have gone like The Office or Fawlty Towers. You could have gone on the comedy route.
Exactly.
But Succession's not a bad one.
Succession. Just so much kind of behind the scenes dealing, kind of slightly furtive, slightly cloak and dagger. I don't think anybody knows. I think anybody knows how this plays out. I think from the start you've seen the figures. It was kind of more than 6 billion up to 9-10 billion. That hasn't changed. I think the Sheikh and Jim Ratcliffe have hit the kind of £6 billion mark. They want more than that, and there's talk now, that they might hold off until the World Cup when they feel there'll be some interest from the US market, and get some more. Whatever they want, they will ultimately get, and that will be the figure they will sell at and go. When that figure gets hit, who it comes from, nobody knows that. And to go back to your question about the Ineos thing, that's always been the intriguing aspect of the Ratcliffe Ineos bid, has been the fact that it would leave the Glazers with a degree of influence. I understand completely why the fans hate that idea. They want the Glazers gone yesterday, So I agree that Ratcliffe, on the one hand, he's being quite cute by offering the Glazers that sweetener. On the other hand, I don't think it's a very smart move, because from the get-go, he then is viewed negatively by the fans, because he's the guy that let the Glazers keep their claws in the club. Quite what influence they'd have, like you say, voting rights, you get into your A shares and your B shares. It gets very, very messy. I think ultimately, as I said before, it's like horse trading. It's like horse trading dressed up as a takeover. It's just grubby, people throwing money and more money at people that want lots of money and have already got a lot of money anyway. And when anybody hits the figure that they want, they'll sell and they will walk away. But they will not be forced into it. They will not be influenced. They have their price and they will sell at the price they want to sell at.
Yeah, I think you've alluded to that prior in some of your articles, and I think there was a piece by one of your colleagues today saying just that about they can be patient. They can take their time if they want. I
completely sympathise with the fans, the protests, the banners, all, the marches. I get it. These people are over in Florida, they're in Washington, they're in New York. They don't care, and they've shown time and time again. The only thing I think that will hit the Glazers will be in the pocket. I think if they see the share price dropping, as it has done recently, and they see costs going up, whether that's with the new stadium or whatever it would be, I think when the figures stop making sense for them, they will sell. But they've been very, very thick-skinned so far. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I
just wanted to ask you quickly on that front. Does this new sponsorship deal have any bearing on any of this? Do you feel the Snapdragon shirt sponsorship? I think it's 60 million a season, is it? One of the biggest deals ever, which that makes up for not winning any titles. I'm buzzing about that one. Do you think that can have any bearing, or was that always on the cards? Because a club like Manchester United, even though we've not won a lot over the years, we're always going to have big sponsorship deals for our shirts.
Yeah, I think TeamViewer was 47, so now it's 60. It's 13 more million pounds. The Adidas deal, of course, got renewed a few months ago. That's another huge deal. So I think people like the Glazers will always be attracted by money, but they know us better than any of us what Man United's worth and what the contracts are worth. They know that they were going to get that deal from Adidas. They know that once the TeamViewer thing ran out or got stopped early, as it were, there would be a queue of people waiting to give them more money. They know they can make money out of Man United. So I don't think it's a massive story that Manchester United make money, and the Glazers know that, and they'll keep milking the club until it makes sense not to, and that's when someone gives them a large chunk of money to walk away. Yeah,
hopefully that's sooner rather than later. Danny in the Super Chat says the club isn't worth the higher figure they want unless they rebuild the stadium, infrastructure, and have a winning team. To get that value makes no sense. I agree. The stadium, you've been so Trav. I mean, even when you've got the press box leaking, that says it all, doesn't it? Which you saw. You think they'd want to keep the press on side?
They've done it on purpose, I think.
Yeah, stop slagging us off.
Drilled a hole.
Stop criticising us. So we'll put some water on your some rain on your laptops. I want to ask you about a couple of players who are not available. I start with Mason Greenwood. Last time you were here, we spoke about Greenwood. Obviously, we didn't know what was going to happen at the time. He was still at the club. Then there was an announcement that he was going to move away from the club. He's obviously gone to Getafe. Where do you see this leading? Do you think there is still a chance that Mason Greenwood comes back to Manchester United and plays for Manchester United, or do you see this being the first step into a permanent move away from the club?
I think Mason Greenwood, goodness me. First and foremost, I don't think they handled the whole thing very well. I think they got to the right conclusion, but having made the wrong choice first of all, then had their arms bent, twisted to make the right decision. So that wasn't the best look. I don't know why, when the CPS dropped the charges in February, I understand the thorough investigation. I understand taking their time. I don't see why they needed to let it go on so long and to let it drift into what was a third season, don't forget, because the arrest came at the end of January last year, so it effectively went into a third season. And Ten Hag didn't. No one needed that. So I think they could have wrapped things up a lot quicker. I think they should have been more decisive from the start. The fact that they had to be almost kind of pushed into the decision they did wasn't a great look. In terms of the question there, Jay, I mean, there was something in the guidance that we got at the time that made me a little bit kind of uneasy. They said there is no expectation that Mason Greenwood plays for Manchester United again. Well, what does that mean? If you're going to say it. Mason Greenwood will not play. There was no expectation. That for me left the door open, and that plays to what you're mentioning here. This theme of it's not being categoric. They've left a little bit of a. I'd be amazed, given the problems they've experienced in the outset, if they tried again.
Right.
I'd be amazed if they tried to bring him back. But I think there is probably a school of thought within the club. Let's see what happens. Let's see how he gets on over in Spain. let's see how things calm down here. And maybe in the future, if he comes out, if he plays well, more importantly, if he over time is able to maybe say something and explain where he was coming from, maybe take the sting out of this. Is it impossible that he comes back? I think it would be very hard, but you're absolutely right. You're sensing what I sensed at the time as well, which seems to be there's probably a 5%, just maybe let's leave the door slightly open.
I felt that with the statements. Yeah. I felt there was a little bit of ambiguity there where it
was on purpose.
Yeah,
that was on purpose.
It was almost like saying, if you actually read, and I read the statements, all of them, here's the club's Richard Arnold's open letter, which I'll get to him shortly. I thought, that's not a definitive. Yeah. This guy's done at United. Yeah. And I know people disagree and say, oh, no, it is. And I'm thinking, if you look at it and you read that from a forensic point of view and go, okay, what does this tell you? It's not done.
No,
it's like,
I think they've definitely. I don't think he will, but I think they've left the door open just in case he does.
Yeah.
So if it ever happens, and people turn around and say, "But you said," they can say, "Actually, no. What we said was this." In the same way, what's happening now with the whole takeover thing, they'll say, if you go back and look at the original statements, nobody says that the club's up for sale.
Yeah.
What we said was this. So. It feels a bit like semantics. It feels a bit like, we're pushing the same food around the plate. But I think it's a perfectly fair point that you mentioned. I get the same feeling that they've not closed the door completely, but I'd be surprised if they got that one through the door.
One person who came in for a bit of flack with that whole saga, if we can call it that, was Richard Arnold. A lot of people were unhappy. Spoke to fans and saw on online, you probably saw him getting a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
The way it was handled, people pointed the finger at him as the sort of the main man in terms of making those decisions. Do you feel he came or is under any pressure at all from this? Because people were saying, there was people calling for him to resign over it, saying you've handled this so badly, you need to go. I know he sort of tried to move on from the Woodward era and tried to do things differently, and there's been, he's had some positive reactions to that, but on this front, it did feel like it was a bit of a mess, and people looking at him going, "You've not handled it well." Do you think there was any pressure on Richard Arnold? Do you think he's?
I don't think pressure. Okay? No, I don't think pressure on him anymore. Going back to what we mentioned before about Ten Hag, I think if you work for Manchester United in that kind of role, you are under pressure. And of course, I'm sure Richard, didn't appreciate or welcome the barrage and the storm he took, over Mason Greenwood right from the start. He would rather it never happened, of course. But I think the club in general, I just thought there felt like a lack of decision, a lack of, they just weren't decisive enough in what they did. They sort of meandered through it. When it came out that he was going to do this video to the leadership group, they began this thing about there were lots of outcomes they planned for. It's what are you doing here? Can you please just tell us what you had this 6-month investigation, and now you're talking about a kind of smorgasbord of different outcomes, and look, can you just tell us what you're doing here? And eventually, as I mentioned before, they got to the decision that I think they had to get to, but it felt like they were dragged there rather than with kind of firm leadership and decision making, they came to that point of view, because it felt very inadequate. I'm not surprised that the club and Richard Arnold came under fire. Under pressure to the point of leaving, no, that's not going to happen.
Just a couple of quick questions before I let you go. Antony, do you think the club have handled that one right, in the right way? Because obviously it was a bit slightly different to the way they handled the Mason Greenwood one. He's not been suspended, he's been put on a leave of absence, which is obviously different, while these allegations are being looked at, and obviously there's different sort of strands to this. Do you think that's been handled in the right way?
I think so, yeah. I think with Greenwood it was difficult. He was arrested from the start. There was a tape that existed from the start, and people made their own minds up about that. And that was pretty damning for him, right from the start, right to the end. That tape, more than anything else, is what took Mason Greenwood down. Antony wasn't and hasn't been, he's not been arrested. These allegations, nothing is proven. So the club were kind of caught because people say, you said, Mason Greenwood, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
So with Antony, they couldn't suspend him on the back of allegations. But then when these things began to build up, there were 3 different women. Brazil did what they did. suddenly the club again were placed in a very, very tough position. They were placed in a situation where they had an obligation of duty to their player, their employee, but also to the alleged victims. And so it was a very tough one for the club, this one. And you're quite right, they didn't suspend him, but they did what Brazil did, and they've now stood him down to look, it's best that you're out of the firing line, out of the public scrutiny. You need to have some time away to go and fight these allegations. I think the club have done the only thing that they could do. I think any criticism, it's that they took a little bit long to get there, whereas Brazil did it, first day pretty much.
Yeah.
And the first statement last Wednesday was a little bit mealy-mouthed, a little bit weak. I think, again, there was a lack of leadership, a lack of decision-making there.
Just one final question. The story that came and went, you were all over it. El Ghazi, that was a quick one. Quick
up and quick down again.
What did you make of that one? Because obviously, as you announced the sort of the story was that he was available, and I think
weighing up was the word we used.
I think there was we had an issue. United have got wingers short of wingers. There's a winger on a free transfer, and I remember I covered it on We Do the Paper Talk. Obviously, we speak about what you guys have been saying, and I said, I can understand this one in a way. It makes sense. He's Dutch. He's been. I'm not being. That's it. Innit? He's a free agent.
He's Dutch and he's got Dutch. 2 legs.
Yeah, he's got 2 legs.
Sign him.
Yeah, he's been at Ajax. He's a winger and he's available. But obviously, in terms of the levels, he's probably not what you need. But what did you make of all that? Because you had to cover it, and then it came and went there quick.
Don't forget, this is the club that went in for Marko Arnautovic about a year ago. So let's not rule things out here. I think we live in an age of social media and internet where things move very, very quickly. We did the story stands, which is that that he was put to the club, and don't forget, they've already signed Reguilon, at left back.
Yeah.
He wasn't planned at all, but of course the injuries to Shaw and Malacia, meant that they had to do that. The Sancho and Antony thing is suddenly foisted upon them. They've got a real problem at right wing. El Ghazi was put to them. They weighed it up and then said, no, he's not one for us. But the information that we had was that he had been put to them and they were considering it, which I believe they did, and then said we considered it, but no thanks.
No thanks. Chris, always a pleasure chatting to you. Make sure you go and check out Chris at the Daily Mail, always covering all the latest Manchester United news, and like you said, it's a big one this weekend, isn't it? Brighton game, eh? The pressure's on. Are we 5 games into the season, and the pressure's already on, but it does feel like that. Like
we could do with a win. We can do
with a win. Don't forget as well to make sure you are subscribing to the channel. Hit that like button as well. I'm Jay Moyer. This has been Chris Wheeler as well from Daily Mail. This has been a 1-to-1 interview. Thanks for watching.